1. Russia's miscalculation of Ukraine's resolve. At the beginning of the invasion, Russia severely underestimated Ukraine's ability to resist. Putin and his generals believed they would capture major cities, including Kiev, within a matter of days. Russian troops were prepared for a quick operation, expecting to face limited resistance. However, Ukraine's response was swift and resilient. Under President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine's military has fought back with remarkable strength. Zelensky's leadership has been a key factor in galvanizing the Ukrainian population and military. Instead of fleeing, as Putin might have anticipated, Zelensky stayed in Kiev, delivering powerful speeches and calling on the Ukrainian people to defend their homeland. His efforts united the country and inspired both civilians and soldiers to stand firm. Western military aid has also been essential in leveling the playing field. Ukrainian forces have been supplied with cutting-edge technologies, such as Javelin anti-tank missiles, drones, and advanced intelligence. This influx of aid has allowed Ukraine to not only defend its territory, but to mount effective counterattacks, pushing Russian forces out of key areas. For example, Ukraine's successful defense of Kiev in the early months of the war completely derailed Putin's initial plans. 2. Military failures and battlefield losses. A significant factor behind Russia's faltering strategy has been poor military performance. While the Russian military was once seen as a formidable force, its failures on the battlefield have revealed serious flaws in its operational capabilities. There have been widespread reports of logistical failures, Russian convoys running out of fuel, soldiers lacking basic supplies, and equipment breaking down mid-operation. Russia's outdated command structures and lack of modern military training have left troops vulnerable on the battlefield. Unlike NATO-trained forces, which emphasize flexibility and coordination, Russia has stuck to rigid Soviet-era military doctrines, which have proven ineffective in modern warfare. These strategies might work for large conventional battles, but they have struggled in the face of guerrilla tactics and urban warfare used by Ukrainian forces. The loss of high-ranking officers and generals in battle has been another blow to Russia's military command. Several Russian generals have been killed in action, which has not only weakened Russia's leadership, but also damaged the morale of its troops. Reports of desertions, refusals to fight, and declining morale among soldiers highlight the deteriorating state of the Russian military. These problems have slowed the Russian advance and created major setbacks for Putin's forces. Tier 3 economic sanctions, a slow but crippling blow. The war has also triggered an unprecedented economic backlash against Russia. The West responded to Russia's aggression with a series of severe economic sanctions aimed at crippling its economy. These sanctions targeted Russia's financial institutions, oligarchs, and most importantly, its energy sector, which has been the backbone of Russia's economy for years. While Russia initially managed to weather some of the sanctions by finding new markets in Asia, these efforts have not been enough to prevent long-term economic damage. Oil and gas exports, which have historically been Russia's main source of income, are now restricted by Europe's gradual divestment from Russian energy. This has forced Russia to sell its oil and gas at discounted rates to countries like China and India, diminishing the financial windfall they once enjoyed. Moreover, Russia's military-industrial complex has taken a significant hit due to its reliance on imported components, particularly microchips used in weapon systems. Western sanctions have cut off Russia from critical technologies needed to manufacture modern military hardware. For instance, the production of tanks and precision-guided missiles has slowed as Russia struggles to obtain the necessary components. The ruble has lost a significant portion of its value, and inflation is rising, further squeezing the Russian economy. While the Russian government has attempted to stabilize the currency through capital controls and subsidies, these measures are proving unsustainable in the long term. The economic pain will only increase as sanctions continue and international companies withdraw from the Russian market. 4. Growing international isolation. Putin also underestimated the international unity that would emerge in response to his invasion. Instead of creating division within NATO, The war has galvanized the alliance, leading to a historic show of support for Ukraine. Countries that had previously maintained neutrality or distanced themselves from NATO, like Sweden and Finland, have now sought membership, expanding the alliance's influence in Eastern Europe. NATO's increased presence in the region has further hampered Russia's ability to project power. NATO has ramped up its military aid to Ukraine, providing advanced weapons, intelligence sharing, and training for Ukrainian soldiers. This has helped Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression more effectively than Putin ever anticipated. Beyond the military response, Putin's invasion has also driven Russia into political isolation. Countries across the globe have condemned the invasion, and many have implemented diplomatic and economic measures against Russia. Even nations that were once close to Russia, like China, have avoided full military support. While China and Russia have maintained trade relations, China has refrained from taking actions that could bring sanctions upon itself. This has left Russia increasingly isolated on the world stage. 5. Domestic pressure and rising dissent. Internally, Putin is facing growing pressure from within Russia. Although he has managed to maintain control through media censorship and harsh crackdowns on protests, the long-term costs of this war are beginning to weigh on the Russian population. Thousands of young men have been sent to fight in Ukraine, and the death toll continues to rise, sparking discontent among families and communities. The Russian government's decision to mobilize more troops through partial conscription in 2022 sparked widespread protests. Many young men fled the country to avoid being drafted, and the Russian public's initial support for the war has started to erode as the conflict drags on with no clear end in sight. Although Putin has maintained control over state-run media, alternative narratives have been spreading through social media and among Russian citizens, further fueling dissatisfaction. Additionally, the sanctions are beginning to have a tangible impact on daily life in Russia. The costs of food, fuel, and everyday goods have risen, and many international companies have pulled out of the Russian market, leaving gaps in supply chains. Over time, the economic strain is likely to exacerbate public dissatisfaction, which could pose a long-term threat to Putin's regime. Conclusion: a failing strategy with no easy way out. Putin's strategy in Ukraine is failing for multiple reasons. He overestimated the strength of the Russian military and underestimated Ukraine's resolve. The logistical failures and low morale among Russian troops have been disastrous on the battlefield. Economic sanctions have crippled Russia's economy and military production. International unity against Russia has grown stronger, not weaker. And domestically, public support for the war is slowly eroding as the economic pain and death toll continue to rise. The war has become a drawn-out conflict with no easy exit for Putin. Russia is becoming increasingly isolated, both economically and diplomatically, and the long-term consequences of this war may be far more damaging than Putin originally anticipated. Without a major shift in strategy, Russia risks further weakening its global standing, leaving it vulnerable both at home and abroad.